Whenever you look into a mirror, you see a reflection of yourself. You don't see an image of your neighbor in that mirror. It's just not how mirrors work. If you booted up a video game, especially one from the 20th century, however, you might see not a reflection of yourself, but a straight white male. And that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about today, is the diversity in the video games, its importance, and how it can impact the gamer community as a whole. Now, I've always been very interested in video games, specifically game development, and I'm actually looking to become a game developer in the near future. And so today I'd like to explain why diversity in video games is a good thing and how to properly implement it. And I'll be doing this first by going over why diversity is a good thing, some of the positives, the negative effects of not making video games diverse, and how to do this properly. And so I'm going to start by going over some of the reasons why diversity is a good thing to include in your video games. Now, I'm going to start off with a quote by Why Diversity Matters in the Modern Video Games Industry, which reads, "Being represented in the media makes you feel noticed. It gives you agency. It means there is a dialogue going on between you and the creators." Now, it's important that in the gaming community, you make sure it's just that, a community. And so your games need to appeal to a diverse group of people so they feel like they're represented in that community, so that they feel like the developers care about them, that their input is important, and that they belong. Not only is it good for psychological reasons, but there are physical benefits to making video games diverse. For example, an example from Microsoft, they have a feature called Copilot, in which two people play on the same controller. One gets the left half of the buttons, the other gets the right. This is especially good for people with disabilities like cerebral palsy, for example, because they have an issue with simple tasks like pushing a button that someone can easily help them with without taking the controller away from them and taking them out of the immersion of the game. And so it has physical and psychological benefits. Now, not including diversity in your games has some negative disadvantages that I'm going to go over as well. For example, if your games are not diverse, they contain a lack of variety, which is discussed in the article Cuphead and the Racist Spectre of Fleischer Art, which is essentially saying that if you exclude other races or cultures from your games, you're essentially whitewashing them and you're only emphasizing inspirations from one culture. As a result of that, video games can become bland. They can start to tell the same narrative, and there's a lack of variety in the industry, a lack of variety in the stories being told. And it can also be very exclusive. So if you are excluding certain groups from video games, they can't identify with that game directly. They don't feel like they have a voice in that particular world, virtual world. And so this is both for particular cultures as well as people with disabilities. For example, if someone is colorblind and you don't have a colorblind mode in their game, they won't be able to properly enjoy it if your game is heavily dependent on visuals. And so now that we understand why diversity in video games is a good thing, it's important to keep in mind that there is a right and wrong way to make sure you include certain groups in your video game. For example, in the article How Using Sexy Female Avatars in Video Games Changes Women, which explains a study that was performed on different women that played as avatars that were conservatively dressed and non-conservatively dressed, shows that if a female representation in the game is too objectified or is too sexy, that it causes women that play those games to have a more negative outlook on themselves and objectify themselves in a way. So the way that you represent characters in games has a psychological impact on those people, and it's important to be mindful of that. Now, in order to make sure games are diverse properly, you need to make sure that the different groups have representation and they can identify with the game, but you also need to be careful not to appropriate any cultures or to view them in a harmful light, as with the objectification of women in female avatars. And so as a game developer, it's important to make sure that your games appeal to a wide variety of audiences and are accessible to multiple people, but it has to be done in a way that will not harm these groups. So it's important to understand, as with anything, to consider your audience and how your choices will affect them. I hope that if anyone is looking to go into game development, you consider this when working on your games in the future.